I think we all know that Apple gets a ton of flack, and some of it's justified, some of it's not. There are people on one side of the spectrum who mostly have minor criticisms saying Apple's just overpriced, but that's mostly just marketing. Then on the other hand, you have pretty serious issues, I would say, with how Apple treats its customers in general. And of course, I'm not trying to tell you guys what to think. These are just my opinions. If you have your own opinions, I'm interested in hearing those as well. So what exactly do I mean by the title of this video? I think that Apple, especially recently, has been taking their customers for granted. And yes, they've been introducing some cool features in their phones, but most of the time they just overblow it with the marketing, say it's the best phone ever. Meanwhile, they're not introducing a lot of features, and they're actually removing features like the headphone jack, while saying that it's adding a feature, which it's clearly not. Now, I'm sure we can all agree that we've heard enough about the whole headphone jack and whether they should have removed it or not. But I think the more important issue is why they said they removed it, which is basically a lie at this point, and you can look at the evidence yourself that I'm going to show you, but it's pretty obvious that they're just kind of treating their customers like a bunch of dummies so they can make more money. And it's this double talk that I've been having a problem with. You see Apple saying that, oh, we just removed the headphone jack because it takes up so much space that we want to add in new features that would not be able to be in there otherwise. Okay, that's kind of a reasonable explanation. Do most people buy it? Probably not. But you know what? It's a reasonable explanation, and it's at least something where they could justify it in the future by adding some killer feature. But then again, you look at what they're doing with the Mac. I said in a previous video, you may have seen, they released a survey asking people how often they use the headphone jack on their MacBooks. Now, I ask you, why would they ask people how often they use the headphone jack on their MacBook laptops if they weren't at least thinking about removing the headphone jack from a laptop? And you cannot tell me that they're just gonna remove it for space in a whole laptop. They barely even introduced anything into the new iPhone. They didn't make it any thinner, even though that's one of the reasons they said they would remove it. It's not thinner, if at all. They didn't really add anything to replace the headphone jack, maybe an extra speaker, but that was the whole point. They're like, oh, we can add in all this extra stuff if we just remove that pesky headphone jack, and then they didn't. And I'm not even criticizing Apple for removing a feature that a lot of people like. They've done it in the past for good reasons. For example, when they removed the floppy disk from their computers to replace it with a CD drive. Everyone criticized them. They said, oh, you're killing it. You're not even gonna have a floppy drive. Meanwhile, it was replaced with a better feature that ended up being the standard, the CD drive. Though in this case, they're not replacing it with anything. They're just taking it out for the sake of taking it out. And in my other video, I did discuss why I think they did this, and it is pretty much a money grab. They're doing it so they can control who can make headphones, and you have to buy a license to use their Lightning connector instead of the free 3.5mm open headphone jack. They just want people to have to pay a license fee to use the Lightning connector. That's the only reason they would do this, especially considering that they would be doing this also possibly on a MacBook where there is no space limitations. And look, I understand that Apple just can't come out and say, we're doing this because we want to make more money. Even though we all know that, they're just gonna have to say something else. But that's not the only example I'm gonna give. It's also in terms of how they support their customers when things go wrong. There are two more specific examples I'm gonna talk about where Apple had a problem with their phone that was their fault, and yet they refused to even acknowledge it and help customers who had the problem. The first one is the famous error 53, where the home button, if it got replaced, then you basically bricked your phone, and if you took it into the Apple store, they'd say you have to get a new phone. They wouldn't even tell customers what the problem was or acknowledge it or fix it. You were just screwed if you had this problem. And it wasn't until there was incredible media outrage about this error before they finally decided to even acknowledge it and start to help customers who had it. However, the most recent damning evidence against Apple is the whole touch disease, where they made a factory defect in a lot of phones where they didn't inject enough adhesive or sealant below one of the processors, which basically was their fault 100%, and it meant that that processor or chip would come loose and make the phone unusable. It would screw up the screen, and then again, they refused to acknowledge this. A lot of people are talking about it. Even after it blew up in the media, they still didn't want to talk about it. And it's like, Apple, who are you fooling? We all know you're not doing this. We all know that you're treating your customers like a bunch of idiots. You're not talking about this problem, hoping that they'll think, oh, I guess my screen broke, better buy a new one. Meanwhile, it was your fault and you're not owning up to it. And that is the type of stuff that I have a problem with Apple. Their behavior clearly states, whether it's from removing a headphone jack that they don't need to remove and then lying about the reason, or saying, you know what, if we just don't talk about this problem, no one will even notice, when clearly they don't think their customers are as smart as they really are. But here's the thing, even if their customers are stupid, even if, I'm not saying they are, but even if they were, that is no excuse by Apple to take advantage of those people. That's basically just evil. You're saying these people are so stupid that we can just take advantage of, even though it was our mistake, you know what, let them deal with it, we just want our money. And I think that's a lot of the reasons why there are so many people who not just don't like Apple, but they actively dislike it and say, you know what, I don't trust Apple. They don't seem to treat their customers right. And of course, that's not always the case. To be fair, a lot of times I used to have an iPhone. When I went into the Apple store, they would often replace it, no questions asked. The people in the store were very helpful. If it was under warranty, they typically just replace the phone. However, the problem is if it's out of warranty and they have this defect and they're not acknowledging it as a defect, then you're out of luck. And I think the bigger problem is the Apple management who is making the call to say, no, we are not going to acknowledge this problem. We are not going to admit this is our problem. So if this comes up, then it's their problem, which is not right. It's as if Apple is picking and choosing which problems they want to deal with. And you know what? I really don't doubt that Apple is going to start dealing with this touch disease problem and actually helping customers if they haven't already. But it's only after they started getting a ton of flack by the mainstream media who call them out on their BS. And it really makes you wonder, where do they draw the line? What have they been hiding even until now? What features are they going to remove just to stuff their own pockets at the expense of customers? We already know it's kind of a business decision, but they don't really put out as many features as they can on new iPhones. It makes sense. They don't want to get rid of all their best features in one feature model and then not have anything in the next model because they want to keep that cash flow. That is actually a reasonable business decision, but when you go and start spewing BS like, oh, we removed the headphone jack because of courage, which everyone knows, no you didn't. And that's really the sort of stuff I'm talking about. I'm not gonna knock Apple for making a design decision. I'm not gonna knock them for making a feature decision, but I will knock them for what they say when it's clearly not true, or it just seems like it's really hoity-toity. They're treating their customers like they know it all, and they don't wanna listen to their customers no matter how angry they get. And of course, you can't knock a business for making a business decision. I understand that. If they didn't think that people would care about the headphone jack, you know what? I don't really mind if they took it out. Obviously, there are a ton of people who bought the iPhone, it's sold out, they didn't care, so I'm not gonna knock them for removing it. I'm gonna knock them for this clearly BS reasons that they're giving. I just genuinely think that the way they're talking to their customers, the way they're explaining their reasoning, just seems like they think we're a bunch of dummies because they're obviously not giving the real reasons. And even if they went out and said, you know what, we just don't think a lot of people are using the headphone jack, we think we can use the space better, but when they go and say, oh, this is just such a huge waste of space, we can do so much with it, we can make it thinner, and then they don't go and do it, it makes you wonder. So of course, that's all just my opinion. I could be completely wrong in your eyes. If you don't think I'm right, give it a thumbs down. If you do think I'm right, give it a thumbs up. Let me know down in the comment section. I don't want you to just think that I'm telling you guys what to think. I'm just giving my thoughts. If you want to give your thoughts, let me know down in the comment section. I'll be reading them. So anyway, if you guys are interested also in watching some other videos, I've got those on the right-hand side. You can actually click those even if you're on a phone. They're a new type of annotation, so you probably should be able to click on them. Also, if you want to subscribe, I'm trying to make videos at least 3 times a week, even more tech videos on this channel now, so it should be fun. So looking forward to hearing from you guys again. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.